My name is Derrick Broze. For the last decade, I've worked as an independent journalist, hosting a radio show, writing books, and producing numerous documentaries about the dangers of technology, indigenous struggles, and the realities of child trafficking. Now, I aim to uncover whether there exists a network of individuals and institutions which ties these issues together. Many researchers posit the existence of an international cartel which covertly manipulates world events for their own benefit. Are these claims simply fantasy and paranoid delusion, or is there truly an agenda to subvert humanity to the demands of the pyramid of power? The Zionist influence. The claim that Jews sit atop the pyramid is complex, as Judaism is simultaneously seen as a race, religion, and culture. While some Jews support the Zionist movement, the effort to provide Jews around the world a homeland as mentioned in the Bible, not all do, nor do all Jews back Israel's actions. To make matters more confusing, some researchers argue that so-called fake Jews are the true power at the top. While we can't explore every thread of this topic, we'll examine the historical claims of Jews running the world and how this ties into the influence of the Zionist movement and the State of Israel. As noted in Chapter 11, Israel's creation was heavily backed by the Rothschild family, who were key supporters of 19th century Zionism. In 1970, Walter Rothschild secured British support for a Jewish homeland in Palestine. The Rothschilds' role in Israel's creation and numerous major geopolitical events has led researchers like John Coleman to place them near the top of the power structure. Some researchers go further, claiming that we should not only consider the Rothschilds' massive wealth, but their Jewish heritage as vital to this investigation. While this topic may make some people uncomfortable due to the history of actual anti-Jewish sentiment, if we are going to answer the question of who is running the roundtable groups, we must take an honest look. Jews have faced persecution for centuries, with many researchers citing their expulsion from dozens of countries due to perceived political and societal influence as evidence of their power. While some sources claim Jews were expelled from 109 countries or as many as 1,000 times, a more accurate count is between 70 and 100 expulsions. Modern beliefs in a Jewish conspiracy often trace back to the protocols of the learned elders of Zion, allegedly the meeting minutes of a Jewish group plotting world control. Some believe they were written by the members of the First Zionist Congress held in Basel, Switzerland in 1897. The protocols first appear in 1903 as a series of articles in the Russian newspaper Znamya and were fully published in 1905 in Sergei Nilis's book, The Great Within the Small. The first protocol is titled Right Lies in Might and is a call for using violence and deception against the public. Quote, "Our power in the present tottering condition of all forms of power will be more invincible than any other because it will remain invisible until the moment when it has gained such strength that no cunning can any longer undermine it." Protocol 2 is called Economic War and discusses using the press to gain, quote, "the power to influence while remaining in the shade." Protocol 4 says in order to, quote, "give the Goyim no time to think and take note, their minds must be diverted towards industry and trade, so all the nations will, quote, "be swallowed up in the pursuit of gain, and in the race for it will not take note of their common foe." The protocols were originally printed in Russia before spreading to the UK and the US, where they gained support from those already blaming Jews for societal ills. Critics, however, dismissed them as just the latest in a long string of so-called anti-Semitic conspiracy theories. In 1921, journalist Philip Graves wrote an exposé for the London Times titled The Truth About the Protocols, a Literary Forgery. He discovered they were based on Maurice Joly's 1864 book, The Dialogue in Hell Between Machiavelli and Montesquieu. The book was a satire against French Emperor Napoleon III. Graves compared the two works and noticed that entire sections and phrases were lifted from Joly's book. In his third article on the protocols, he writes, quote, "The author of the protocols simply copied from the dialogues a number of passages in which Machiavelli is made to enunciate the doctrines and tactics of despotism as they were at that time practiced by Napoleon, and put them into the mouth of an imaginary Jewish elder. There can be little doubt that the forgery was perpetrated by some member of the Russian secret police." The protocols were also declared a forgery during the 1933 Bern trial in Switzerland, where two pro-Nazi men were fined for distributing anti-Jewish material. Both men were found to be guilty of breaking the law and made to pay a fine. Though their convictions were overturned on appeal, the court's witnesses declared the protocols a fake. Most studies of the protocols trace the text back to Joly's earlier satire. Despite the forgeries, some believe the protocols still contain an element of truth. In fact, Conrad Hayden, an anti-Nazi contemporary of Hitler, wrote that, quote, "Today the forgery is incontrovertibly proved, yet something infinitely significant has remained. A textbook of world domination, pure and simple. They do contain a deeper truth, but the demonstrable history of their origin shows that this truth involves not a Jewish, but a fascist world conspiracy." Adam Green, host of No More News, believes the Judeo-Christian religions are themselves part of the problem which allows Zionists to manipulate our world.
Who do I think is at the very top? I would say the most dominant religions of the last 1700 years. Messianic apocalyptic Judaism in its three branches, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, all ultimately want the same thing, believe in the same prophecies with slight differences. From what we can see, the Judeo-Christian Islamic religions are the most dominant religions on the planet for the last almost 2,000 years. There could be some type of hidden hand manipulating and that created that, but I don't have any good proof of that. And just from what we know and what we can prove, it is the Messianic conspiracy. It is the Torah blueprint. It is the Messiah prophecies meant on ruling the world in the end times. I mean, who has the most influence over America? It's like we're basically run by a Judeo-Christian apocalyptic death cult with Mike Pompeo, the former Secretary of State, believes in the rapture. All the top Republicans are close with John Hagee, the end times fanatic that's obsessed with Israel. And both these Christian Zionists and the rabbis desire an end times war so Jesus will return and their prophecies can be fulfilled. And Christians aren't opposing that because Christians ultimately want the exact same thing. They also want the prophesied Messiah from the Bible to rule the world in the end times. Even these Christians and independent media people that are supposedly fighting against the satanic New World Order, what they're really doing in the name of fighting the so-called satanic New World Order, they're helping usher in the Torah prophecy Jesus New World Order.
Green says Messianic beliefs among some Jews have been dominant for centuries and relate to the power struggle for control of the planet. One example is 17th century mystic ch17, Zevi, who declared himself the Jewish Messiah at age 22 in 1648. He claimed to possess powers like flight and prediction of the future. His following grew as he encouraged breaking traditional Jewish laws, for instance, feasting on fasting days. Mainstream Jews considered him a heretic. By 1666, Zevi had been arrested by the Ottoman Empire in Constantinople and given an ultimatum: convert to Islam and stop calling himself the Messiah, or face death. Zevi chose to convert. Hundreds of his followers also converted to Islam and became known as the Donmeh. Some still believed he was the Messiah, leading to the rise of Shabbatinism after his death. One of the most well-known Shabbatin devotees was a man named Jacob Frank, who was born around 1726. By 1755, Frank declared himself the direct successor of Zevi. He also preached defiance of Jewish laws, and his Shabbatin Frankist sect was known for their Kabbalistic mysticism, orgies, and incest. Although Zevi and the Shabbatin Frankists are mostly unknown to the average person, some researchers believe the Shabbatins are at the top of the pyramid of power. One thing is for certain: the Zionist agenda remains highly influential in the 2020s, with unprecedented U.S. support for Israel, governments providing endless funding for genocidal actions, and politicians who receive millions of dollars from the Zionist lobby while literally taking oaths to Israel.
By the way, everybody but me has an AIPAC person.
What does that mean, an AIPAC person?
It's like your babysitter, your AIPAC babysitter, who is always talking to you for AIPAC.
At every crucial juncture, at every fork in the road, we have been there for Israel every single time.
Israel's security is non-negotiable.
Together, we will ensure that the unbreakable friendship between the United States and Israel is forever.
We stand with Israel.
The United States will support Israel
militarily, financially, economically, to ensure that they can withstand anything that comes their way.
I am a Zionist. You don't have to be a Jew to be a Zionist.
It's an honor to be here with the first Jewish president of the United States.
Critics of Israeli policies are increasingly labeled anti-Semitic, and students protesting against the crimes of Israel are now being targeted for speaking out on U.S. campuses. Zionist supporters defend all actions by Israel and ignore the clear bias towards the nation. Of course, Zionists are not only Jews. There are Zionist Christians, atheists, and members of all political parties. Loyalist groups like Betar track anti-Israel protesters online, aiming to label them anti-Semitic, damage their reputations, and eventually have them deported. At the same time, it is undeniable that some people wrongly blame all Jews for the world's problems and judge people solely based on their ancestry. While Zionist influence on geopolitics is real, claiming all Jews are part of a worldwide conspiracy is mistaken and overly simplistic. While Adam Green strongly criticizes Israel and Jewish influence, he also rejects this broad view.
Jews are ultimately victims of this Judeo-psyop as well. Although Judaism as a whole may have had some benefit from it, individual Jews have suffered throughout history. They're victims of this conspiracy as well. And most Jews wouldn't even be aware of this overarching agenda, although it's almost hidden in plain sight. And obviously, these messianic memes and these religions that developed thousands of years ago, people today have fallen victims under its spell. It's definitely not all Jews. It's not every Jew. It's definitely not only Jews, but it is the Jewish religion. The only people that were waiting for a Messiah and believing the Torah before Christianity and Islam were known as Jews. But these are memes that have a life of their own. It wasn't even all Jews that created Christianity. It was a subset of mystical, messianic. There wasn't a monolithic Judaism. Just like today, there was a diverse opinions and sects in Judaism.
Of course, this does not mean that there are no Jews at the top of the pyramid of power. In the 16 episodes of this series, we've covered a wide range of institutions, governments, and organizations. For what it's worth, here are the players who are of Jewish ancestry. Big media tycoons like Michael Bloomberg and Donald and Samuel Newhouse with Advanced Publications, and Brian Roberts, CEO of Comcast, deep state agent Henry Kissinger, big tech oligarchs Mark Zuckerberg of Meta, Sergey Brin, co-founder of Google, and Alex Karp at Palantir. In Hollywood, we see that numerous heads of the Big Five film studios have Jewish ancestry, including Alan Bergman and Bob Iger at Disney, David Zaslav and Michael DeLuca at Warner Brothers, Tom Rothman, chairman and CEO of Sony Pictures, Brian Robbins, former president and CEO of Paramount Pictures, and David Ellison, the head of the newly formed Paramount Skydance Corporation. Hollywood is indeed one industry which has been prominently run by Jews since its founding. We also see Abraham Flexner, Rockefeller ally and author of the Flexner Report. The creation of the Federal Reserve also involved two Jews, Paul Warburg and Jacob Schiff. The Epstein network also involved a Jewish cabal, from Jeffrey Epstein himself, Robert and Ghislaine Maxwell, and Les Wexner of the little-known Mega Group, a group made up of Jewish billionaires dedicated to advancing the Zionist agenda. Although the key figures involved in the founding of the technocracy movement were not Jewish, Harold Loeb, another important technocrat, did have a Jewish ancestry. Interestingly, he was the son of Albert Loeb, a partner at law firm Kuhn, Loeb & Co., which was instrumental in the creation of the Federal Reserve. While many researchers exclusively point the finger at the Jews or the Zionists, in the 19th century, a French Catholic priest named Ernest Jesuit warned of a Judeo-Masonic conspiracy. Jesuit was the first person to print the French version of the Protocols of Zion, and his takeaway was that Jewish leaders were conspiring with Freemasons to infiltrate society and create their version of a new world order. Before examining the Judeo-Masonic conspiracy claims, it's important to understand the Freemasons' influence. According to Masonic history, the modern Freemason lodges trace their origins to biblical times, but most scholars place modern Freemasonry between the 1500s and 1700s. Some link its roots to the Rosicrucian movement of the early 1600s, which claimed to offer hidden truths from ancient occult knowledge. What is certain is that the Freemasons have since become a worldwide movement with various lodges, grand lodges, and conspiracy theories surrounding their intentions. Like the Jewish people, they've been expelled from many countries due to growing influence. They attracted suspicion from monarchs, church leaders, and politicians. In the United States, the anti-Mason party emerged in the late 1820s as the public became weary of their true goals. The anti-Mason party was sparked by the disappearance of William Morgan, a Canadian bricklayer who exposed Mason secrets in his book, Illustrations of Masonry, before being abducted and murdered. A murder which many people believe involved the Freemasons. This murder inspired John Quincy Adams, America's 6th president, to publish the 1842 book, Letters on the Masonic Institution, in which he criticized the secret oaths and questioned the loyalty of the Freemasons. Much of the reason the Masons have faced opposition and expulsion relates to how many Masons have been essential in various revolutions, civil wars, and as heads of states and monarchs, including King Leopold I in Belgium, Pedro I of Brazil, Wilhelm I in Germany, Maximilian I of Mexico, Wilhelm II in the Netherlands, and George VI of the United Kingdom. During the American Revolution, at least 68 of the 200-plus founding fathers were Freemasons, including signers of the Declaration of Independence. Notable members include George Washington, a member of the Fredericksburg Lodge in Virginia, Benjamin Franklin, a member of St. John's Lodge in Philadelphia, John Hancock, a member of the Lodge of St. Andrew in Boston, and Paul Revere, infamous for his midnight ride warning of the incoming British troops, was also a member of St. Andrew's Lodge. There are also numerous U.S. presidents with membership in Masonic lodges, including Washington, James Monroe, Andrew Jackson, James Polk, James Buchanan, Andrew Johnson, James Garfield, William McKinley, Theodore Roosevelt, William Taft, Warren Harding, Franklin Roosevelt, Harry Truman, Lyndon Johnson, and Gerald Ford. As a youth, former President Bill Clinton was a member of the Masonic youth group, Order of Des Moines. The history of Freemasonry in the U.S. is prominent. There are numerous Masonic buildings and symbols in Washington, D.C. and Philadelphia. George Washington was also aware of attempts to infiltrate Masonic lodges by groups seeking to subvert the newly formed United States. In August 1798, George Washington corresponded with George W. Snyder about the book Proofs of a Conspiracy Against All Religions and Governments of Europe, written by John Robison, a Scottish physicist and member of the Royal Society of Edinburgh. Robison believed the French Revolution had been infiltrated by the Bavarian Illuminati and argued that similar forces were working within Freemason lodges around the world to overthrow governments and religions. Snyder mailed Washington a copy of Robison's book and warned him of the attempts to take over the U.S. from within. Snyder tells Washington the book, quote, gives a full account of a society of Freemasons that distinguishes itself by the name of Illuminati, whose plan is to overturn all government and all religion, even natural, and who endeavor to eradicate every idea of a supreme being. Snyder urged Washington to prevent this horrid plan from corrupting the brethren of the English Lodge, which Washington was said to preside over. Washington responded by noting that he had, quote, heard much of the nefarious and dangerous plan of the Illuminati, but was not familiar with the book. He also clarified that he wasn't leading any Masonic lodges and claimed he had only visited one a couple of times in the last 30 years. He added that he didn't believe the United States lodges were, quote, contaminated with the principles ascribed to the Society of the Illuminati. However, after several exchanges, on October 24, 1798, Washington stated that he had come to believe American lodges were indeed being infiltrated. Quote, it was not my intention to doubt that the doctrines of the Illuminati and the principles of Jacobinism had not spread in the United States. On the contrary, no one is more fully satisfied of this fact than I am. Following Washington's death, a copy of Proofs of a Conspiracy was found in his library. Robison's book focuses on the influence of the Bavarian Illuminati and the Society of Jesus, also known as the Jesuits. Robison writes that, quote, the Jesuits took a more active hand in Freemasonry than ever. They ingrained themselves into the English lodges and, quote, at this time changes were made in some of the Masonic symbols, particularly in the tracing of the lodge, which bear evident marks of Jesuit interference. We will explore the Jesuits and the Illuminati shortly. Freemason influence was also evident in the United States annexation of Hawaii. A 13-member group known as the Citizens Committee of Public Safety, or simply the Committee of Safety, planned the operation. On January 17, 1893, they carried out a coup against the Hawaiian Kingdom. The Queen ordered her troops to surrender. Within 48 hours, nations around the world recognized the provisional government, and by 1898, Hawaii was annexed by the United States. The Queen later stated that the provisional government did not derive its authority from Hawaiian voters, but rather from the so-called Committee of Public Safety, which she noted was, quote, comprised largely of persons claiming American citizenship. Not one single Hawaiian was a member. Several key members of the conspiracy were Freemasons. Henry E. Cooper, chairman of the committee, was already a Freemason in San Diego before becoming a Master Mason with the 22nd Hawaiian Lodge in 1894 and later became a Sovereign Grand Inspector General. Co-conspirator Andrew Brown was a prominent member of the Hawaiian Lodge No. 21. John McCandless, a businessman in mining and banking, was also a known member of the Freemasons and the director of the Bank of Hawaii. The United States is not alone in having political leaders with membership in Masonic lodges. In Mexico, several presidents have been Freemasons, including Porfirio Diaz, Benito Juarez, and Antonio Santa Anna, as well as various revolutionary figures, including Ignacio Allende, Jose Maria Morelos, and Miguel Hidalgo y Costilla. The Freemasons arrived in Mexico around the 1820s. In 1827, Mexican leaders, led by Vice President Nicolás Bravo, initiated the Plan de Montaño, banning secret societies, particularly Freemasons. The goal was to curb the influence of the York Rite Mason Lodge in favor of the conservative Scottish Rite Lodges. In 1926, Mexican President Plutarco Elias Calles initiated Calles' Law, enforcing restrictions against the Catholic Church under Article 130 of the 1917 Mexican Constitution. This law enforced the separation of church and state, requiring all churches to register with the government and prohibited priests from holding political office. The enforcement of Calles' Law can be viewed as a battle between the Freemasons' effort to secularize Mexico and the Catholic Church. While some Jesuit priests supported the war, the Church officially remained neutral. According to the book Cristero Mexico, during a Freemason banquet, President Emilio Portes Gil highlighted the Masonic influence on Mexico. Quote, in Mexico, the state and Freemasonry in recent years have been one and the same thing, two entities that march side by side, because the men who in recent years have been in power have always known how to be in solidarity with the revolutionary principles of Freemasonry. The book also states that Mexican President Calles was a 33rd degree Mason and was awarded the Masonic Merit Medal by the Supreme Grand Commander of the Scottish Rite as a reward for his campaign against Catholicism. There have also been warnings about the Masons playing a role in the French Revolution. John Robison's Proof of a Conspiracy was not the first book to question the role of Masons in France. In fact, Robison was picking up on a thread which was beginning to spread across Europe. In the same period, French journalist and priest Augustin Borel exposed the influence of Freemasons in the French Revolution and the Reign of Terror. In 1797, he published Memoirs illustrating the history of Jacobinism, connecting the Jacobins with Freemason lodges. He believed the Masons were subverting the Catholic Church through occult practices and Enlightenment ideals. Meanwhile, Ernest Jouen, the previously mentioned Catholic priest who first published the French edition of the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, also believed there was a Judeo-Masonic conspiracy to control the world and attack Christianity. In his journal, International Review of Secret Societies, he shared communications from Vatican leaders who commended him for his efforts. He emphasized that several popes had spoken out against Masonry. Jouen's view is so commonly held in Vatican leadership that Pope Benedict XV made him an honorary prelate. Pope Pius IX thanked Jouen for combating the Catholic Church's, quote, mortal enemy. Jouen's writing and the International Review of Secret Societies influenced French journalist Léon de Ponsens, who focused on the role of Masons and Jewish powers in major world events such as World War I, the creation of Israel, and the League of Nations. In 1928, Ponsens published The Secret Powers Behind Revolution, Freemasonry, and Judaism, and later The Occult War. Ponsens blamed Masons and Jewish financiers like James de Rothschild and Jacob Schiff for the French and Russian revolutions. In Secret Powers, he says the Jewish people are uniquely fitted to this role of overthrowing traditions because they have, quote, an instinctive opposition to every established order, which is, quote, a direct consequence of their age-long effort to maintain the immutability of their ideal and constancy of their original traditions. Ponsens' writing drew on the 1910 book, The Anti-Christian Conspiracy, the Masonic Temple Seeking to Rise on the Ruins of the Catholic Church. Written by Catholic priest Henry de Losses, the book quotes directly from a 1904 debate in France's Chamber of Deputies where several officials affirmed their belief that Freemasons had, quote, worked in secret to prepare the revolution. Quote, We are therefore perfectly in agreement on this point that Masonry was the sole author of the revolution, Marquis de Rochambeau. To which a deputy named François-Henri Jumel responded, quote, "We do more than acknowledge it, we proclaim it." Both Ponsens and Delosses assert that Freemasonry is involved in a worldwide conspiracy to undermine the Catholic Church and turn people away from religion. Ponsen and Secret Powers blames, quote, "materialism and atheism in the spiritual domain, liberalism, democracy, and republic in the political domain, collectivism and the social domain, for taking the common man away from the church and away from the support of monarchy." A recurring theme in these claims is that Masons attack tradition, targeting monarchy and Catholicism. French revolutionaries not only advocated for reducing the church's power, some went a step further and called for making reason their new god, while also murdering clergy and burning churches. On one hand, it's understandable that as the ideas of freedom of speech and self-ownership spread throughout the world, the people of the 18th century would desire to be free from the chains of religious dogma and the alleged divinity of kings. Yet for those loyal to church and crown, this felt like a direct threat to their way of life. Were the Masons attempting to subvert humanity for worldwide domination, or was this a natural evolution of humanity breaking free from the chains of bondage? Or is the truth somewhere in the middle? Delosses, Ponsens, Jouens, and Borel all point to the presence of Jews and Masons among the thought leaders of the French, Russian, and even Hungarian revolutions. They also point to financing from Jewish bankers as evidence that these movements were a Judeo-Masonic conspiracy. However, even Ponsens, with his firm anti-Jewish stance, refused to condemn all Jews or all Masons. In Secret Powers, he writes, quote, "To conclude from this that Jewry forms a compact revolutionary army directed by a single supreme chief would be absurd. What is the proportion of those who are in this conspiracy? We do not know. All Jews are not Bolshevists, all Masons are not revolutionary atheists, but nevertheless every Jew because of his Judaic mentality, and every Mason because of his Masonic mentality, is in essence an unconscious revolutionary." The French weren't alone in their concerns. Many researchers believe the Masons weren't acting independently, but were part of a broader worldwide Jewish conspiracy. In fact, in 1855, Isaac Meyer Wise, an American rabbi who was called the foremost rabbi in America, wrote that, quote, "Masonry is a Jewish institution whose history, degrees, charges, passwords, and explanations are Jewish from beginning to the end." Additionally, Albert Pike, the Sovereign Grand Commander of the Supreme Council of the Scottish Rite, also pointed to Jewish influence on Freemasonry. In his book, Morals and Dogma, he writes, quote, "All the Masonic associations gain their secrets and their symbols from the Jewish mystic tradition of Kabbalah." Whether the Freemasons are a Jewish creation or simply inspired by Jewish history depends on your individual perspective. Regardless, Freemasons have clearly played a significant role in major geopolitical events for centuries, if not much further back in history. Regarding the players we have mentioned in this series and in this episode, we do see the influence of the Freemasons. For example, Senator Nelson Aldrich, who was instrumental in the creation of the Federal Reserve, was a member of the Freemason Lodge in Rhode Island. Cecil Rhodes, the architect for the Rhodes Scholarship and Round Table groups, was initiated into Apollo University Lodge number 357 at Oxford in 1877. Several members of the founding of Columbia University, the birthplace of technocracy and the Trilateral Commission, served as members of the Freemasons in New York, including Philip and William Livingston. Joseph Redinger, one of the founders of the Bilderberg Group, was also a Freemason. Finally, Adam Weishaupt, founder of the infamous Bavarian Illuminati, which John Robeson warned about, was inducted into the Masonic Lodge in Munich in 1777. As we shall learn, Weishaupt had interactions with the Freemasons and the Jesuits. The Society of Jesus, aka the Jesuits. The Jesuits began as a small group of University of Paris students who took vows of poverty and chastity. They formed a religious order called the Company, later known as the Society of Jesus. In 1537, they went to Italy to seek approval from the Pope, and by 1540, Pope Paul III allowed them to become ordained as priests, establish colleges, hold seminars, and recruit for the Catholic Church. The group chose Ignatius of Loyola, or Saint Ignatius, to be their first superior general of the order. Ignatius was a Spanish Catholic priest and former soldier who spent 10 years in the Spanish military. It was this military experience which saw him treat the Jesuits as a military order as much as a religious one. During the Counter-Reformation, the Jesuits were tasked with promoting Catholicism and pushing back on the growth of the Protestants. By the 1545 Council of Trent, they were spreading the church's message to colonies and building schools and churches to expand their fledgling movement. Over the next 200 years, monarchs, governments, and Freemasons became suspicious of the Jesuits and their influence, fearing that the church's power and autonomy threatened emerging ideals of liberty and free thought. The Jesuits were expelled from the Portuguese Empire in 1759, then from France, Malta, Naples, Sicily, Spain, Austria, and Hungary. Pope Clement XIV suppressed the order in all Catholic territories in 1773. His death shortly afterwards has been believed by some to have been a Jesuit poisoning, although he was 71 years old at the time of his death. Alexander I banned the Jesuits from Imperial Russia in 1820, and Switzerland's 1848 constitution barred them from government and church roles. Despite the attempts at suppressing the Jesuits, their message spread throughout China, Russia, Prussia, and the United States. By the early 19th century, fears of the Jesuits led to the publishing of essays and books discussing their alleged secret plans for world domination. In 1835, Samuel B. Morse, the American inventor of Morse code, published Foreign Conspiracy Against the Liberties of the United States, accusing the Jesuits of secretly plotting to subvert the American experiment. According to Morse, the Jesuits were acting on behalf of the Vatican and the St. Leopold Foundation, also known as the Leopoldine Society. The St. Leopold Foundation was formed in Vienna, Austria, in 1829 to support Catholic missions in the U.S. Morse believed the Austrian monarchy was secretly involved in this effort. A decade after Morse's book, Jacobo Leon, a former novitiate of the Jesuits, published the book The Jesuit Conspiracy, The Secret Plan of the Order. Leon told the story of how he joined the Jesuits at the age of 19 in 1824. He said he met with the Jesuit rector who told him to give a confession of his sins from his entire life. From there, he was accepted into the order. Leon claimed that in September of that year, he was living as a Jesuit novitiate at Chieri and decided to walk in the garden. He went to ask the father for permission when he found the Jesuit library. As Leon began exploring the books, he discovered a second row of books hidden behind the first, and a third behind the second. In this third row of books, he discovered secret documents, including his own confession, as well as confessions of novices, strangers, Jesuits, and other powerful individuals. While reading the documents, Leon heard someone approaching and took cover. He overheard 8 to 10 senior Jesuits discussing secret oaths and plans for world domination. He took notes on what he heard, and later left the order before becoming a vocal critic of the Jesuits. He believed the confessions obtained by the Jesuits would be used to blackmail their colleagues and enemies who feared the truth of their transgressions being revealed to the public. Leon briefly mentions the Moneta Secreta, or the Secret Monitor, an alleged secret Jesuit plan for world domination which first appeared in Polish in 1612 under the name de Moneta Privata. Though often considered a debunked forgery by a former Jesuit, some believe it contains real instructions from Claudio Acquaviva, the Society's 5th general. The Moneta Secreta shows up in 1883 when Edwin Allen Sherman publishes his book, Engineer Corps of Hell. In this book, Sherman relays a story of how in August 1870, he was working at the ancient and accepted Scottish Rite of Freemasonry Lodge in San Francisco, California, when a stranger showed up. This older man told a story of working with the Archaeological Society of France, traveling through Peru, Bolivia, and Chile, and eventually discovering an old Spanish adobe house that was occupied by the local indigenous population. The old man would stay at this home from time to time as he traveled and worked on his studies. One night, while preparing to write, the man found a package under his bed. Inside, he discovered the secret manual of instructions for Jesuit ceremonies, printed in Latin with the seal and the signatures of the general and the secretary of the order at Rome. The man quickly copied the book from Latin to French and placed the package back where he found it before leaving the next day. When he returned a week later, he was told that a bishop and his servant returned in, quote, great trepidation and anxiety, looking for the package. The wandering Mason eventually printed the book in Spanish and distributed it to his Masonic brethren in Spanish America. He claimed his life was under threat and that he needed to leave before he was murdered. In the end, he was stabbed and shot while making his escape. The traveling Mason reportedly asked Sherman to print the documents so it could be a valuable weapon in the hands of the Masonic fraternity. Sherman claimed his documents were the same secret monitor of the Jesuits from the 1600s. Whether or not that is true is unknown. Sherman's book claims to reveal secret Jesuit oaths. According to the documents, Jesuits are tasked with sowing jealousy and hatred between communities, creating revolutions and infiltrating influential sectors like banking, law, education, and government. He says their goal is to gain the trust of key figures in society to further their agenda. When they finally take the secret oath, the aspiring Jesuit has a dagger to his heart as he states, quote, "I do now renounce and disown any allegiance as due to any heretical king, prince, or state named Protestants or liberals, or obedience to any of their laws, magistrates, or officers." The alleged secret oath calls on the Jesuits to promise to, quote, "make and wage relentless war, to exterminate Protestants and liberals from the face of the earth, and not to spare anyone regardless of their age, sex, or condition." The Jesuit states that they will, quote, "hang, burn, waste, boil, flay, strangle, and bury alive these infamous heretics, rip up the stomachs and wombs of their women, and crush their infants' heads against the walls, in order to annihilate forever their inexorable race." Finally, the Jesuit initiate acknowledges that should they fail to do as they're told, their fellow soldiers of the militia of the Pope will cut off their hands and feet, cut their throat from ear to ear, cut open their belly, and pour sulfur in the wound. It should be noted that the version of the secret instructions in Sherman's book are different from the available printings of the alleged original Moneta Secreta. Nevertheless, the rumors of the Moneta Secreta contribute to theories of secret plots by the Jesuits. For their part, Jesuit researchers have attempted to debunk the stories surrounding the Moneta Secreta. According to Thomas J. Campbell, a Jesuit historian, and his book, The Jesuits 1534 to 1921, some believers in the Moneta claim it was discovered in the secret archives of the society at Padua, Italy. He says the use of the term Moneta Secreta was a clever imitation of an official Jesuit document known as the Moneta Generalia. Finally, Campbell and other Jesuit historians claim the anonymous document was traced to Jerome Zahorowski, a Jesuit priest who had been dismissed from the society for disciplinary matters in 1613. Campbell says he became disgruntled after failing a theology exam which prevented him from taking the fourth vow of the Jesuits. Zahorowski was reportedly charged by the Inquisition for the forgery. After initially denying his role, he is alleged to have confessed to being the author while on his deathbed. However, in the book Moneta Proveta, the critical edition of the Latin and Polish text, published in June 2025, researchers say there is no direct proof linking the authorship of the Moneta to Zahorowski. Instead, the authors of that study push back on the idea that the Moneta was simply a product of the internal Jesuit discord, and instead believe the publishing of the document was, quote, part of a broader, calculated anti-Jesuit campaign that resonated across Catholic and Protestant territories across Europe, likely connected to Venetian circles in Italy who opposed the Jesuits. We will be taking a look at the power of the Venetian nobility shortly. The Jesuits have been blamed for a number of important geopolitical events. Edwin Sherman dedicated his book, The Engineer Corps of Hell, to Charles Chiniquy, a Canadian activist and former Catholic priest who was a vocal critic of the Jesuits as well. In 1886, only 3 years after Sherman's book, Chiniquy published his autobiography, 50 Years in the Church of Rome, detailing what he saw as pagan influence in Catholicism. He warned the Vatican was attempting to flood the U.S. with Catholic immigrants from Ireland, Germany, and France. Chiniquy claimed the Vatican and the Jesuits were involved with the murder of U.S. President Abraham Lincoln. The two men knew each other after Lincoln defended Chiniquy in a libel lawsuit. That much can be proven with historical records. However, what is less certain is whether or not Lincoln feared the Jesuits were a threat to his life, as Chiniquy would later claim in his autobiography. Determining whether the Jesuits and the Vatican are part of a worldwide conspiracy is challenging. Supporters of this theory argue that the Jesuit superior general, sometimes known as the Black Pope or the Grey Pope, is the top of the pyramid. For certain, the Vatican has been involved in numerous atrocities, including covering up child abuse and funding the Nazis and helping them escape. The Jesuits have also educated many individuals through their universities around the world, including the United States, the UK, Argentina, Austria, Brazil, Canada, India, Indonesia, and even China. While not every graduate of a Jesuit university is a Jesuit or even Catholic, these graduates have gone on to hold influential and powerful positions in banking, military, intelligence, and governments, leading many people to question their role in the pyramid. This includes former CIA directors John Tenet, Leon Panetta, and John Brennan. Even U.S. President Donald Trump spent 2 years at Fordham University, a Jesuit institution. Not to mention, Cecil Rhodes specifically mentioned the Jesuits as a model for his roundtable groups. As far as the evidence of them being at the top of the pyramid, we have two separate accounts of individuals claiming to have gained access to secret documents detailing the plans of the Jesuits. Of course, the Society of Jesus has denied any connection to these secret documents and oaths, and says they are simply signs of anti-Catholic sentiment. The Jesuits and Freemason connection. When examining the history of the Jesuits and the Masons, it becomes clear that both groups often accuse each other of plotting world domination. For example, Augustin Borel, author of the book Memoirs Illustrating the History of Jacobinism, was a Jesuit priest. Ernest Juin, the outspoken critic of Masonry, was a Catholic priest. And Leon de Ponsens, the author of The Secret Powers Behind Revolution, Freemasonry and Judaism, was a Catholic journalist who worked closely with the Vatican. Meanwhile, Edwin Allen Sherman, author of Engineer Corps of Hell, was Grand Registrar of the Grand Consistory of the 32nd degree of the ancient and accepted Scottish Rite of Freemasonry in California, and Secretary of the Masonic Veteran Association of the Pacific Coast. Quite simply, none of these accounts are without bias. One way to view this rivalry is that as Enlightenment ideas spread in the 18th century, the Catholic Church and the Jesuits grew concerned about the ideological threats to their religion, and in response, promoted anti-Masonic conspiracies. Meanwhile, the Freemasons wanted to see an end of rule by monarchy and superstition, so they spread anti-Jesuit theories in hopes of reducing support for the Church. Another theory suggests the Jesuits infiltrated the Masons to insert symbols and myths linked to the Knights Templar. The idea came from Nicolas Bonneville, a French journalist, Jacobin, printer, and political figure active during the French Revolution. He later befriended American revolutionary Thomas Paine when he printed Paine's own essay on Freemasonry. In 1788, Bonneville published 2 books on his theories of a Jesuit infiltration of Masonry, titled The Jesuits Expelled from Masonry and Dagger Shattered by the Masons. He argued they inserted the 4 Templar vows into high-level degree Masonic lodges and hid coded messages in Masonic texts. He claimed a Jesuit master key could unlock the hidden meaning under very common words. Some believe the Jesuit-Mason conflict is a distraction, claiming Jewish financiers are truly behind it all. These researchers cite the French Rothschilds' loan to the Vatican as evidence of Jewish manipulation of the Catholic Church. Adam Green thinks this debate misses a more important point.
A lot of conspiracy researchers like to focus on secret societies, Freemasons, Sabbateans, supposed Khazar conspiracies, but I see the Judeo-Yahweh messianic memes as the conspiracy that all of those are rooted in. The Freemasons, Sabbateans, both just manifestations of Judaism. I think the greatest conspiracy is hidden in plain sight. It's the greatest book ever printed, greatest book ever sold. It's the Bible. Everybody has it on their shelf, and the conspiracy and the blueprint.
Green may be correct. Perhaps the debates surrounding the Jesuits, the Masons, and even the Zionist Jews are missing the bigger point. Maybe there's an even more secretive group behind them which has been manipulating the world from atop of the pyramid of power for centuries. Nicolas Bonneville, the French revolutionary, may have been working for this secretive group. In 1787, he met Johann Bode in Paris and joined the Bavarian Illuminati. Bode was Illuminati founder Adam Weishaupt's second-in-command. Bonneville's apparent history with the Illuminati was discussed extensively in the book Fire in the Minds of Men, Origins of the Revolutionary Faith, written by James Billington, the 13th Librarian of Congress under President Ronald Reagan. Billington says the modern revolutionary tradition, which began in France, grew out of occult Freemasonry. He said these ideas originated from Pythagorean mysticism and that the men behind the revolutionary fervor were greatly inspired by Bavarian Illuminism. So was the Illuminati the true force behind the accusations that the Jesuits had infiltrated the Freemasons? Is the Illuminati yet another name for the Jewish financiers? As we shall see, the history remains uncertain. The Illuminati. Thousands of books and podcasts have examined the Bavarian Illuminati, from its founding by Adam Weishaupt in 1776 to speculations and conspiracy theories about its continued existence. We're going to take a brief look at both the history and the speculation to see if perhaps the infamous Illuminati are the ones sitting atop the pyramid of power, influencing the Rhodes Roundtable groups, the Jesuits, Masons, and Zionists for the last 250 years. By now, the story of the founding of the Illuminati is well known. In 1775, Adam Weishaupt, a professor at the Jesuit-run University of Ingolstadt, became disillusioned with Jesuit teachings following Pope Clement XIV's 1773 command to dissolve the Jesuit order. Weishaupt grew to disdain the Jesuits and sought to create his own group based on the degrees of Masonry, which would spread reason and Enlightenment thinking. On May 1, 1776, Weishaupt's group was formed under the name of the Covenant of Perfectibility, or the Perfectibilists. The group took the Owl of Minerva as their symbol to represent wisdom. They also used historical aliases for their members, with Weishaupt becoming known as Spartacus. Weishaupt was admitted to the Freemason Lodge of the Rite of Strict Observance in February 1777. He came to believe that the Mason lodges would be key to spreading the secret mission of the Perfectibilists. By April 1778, the group became known as the Order of the Illuminati and began recruiting among the professionals of the day, including church officials, academics, doctors, and lawyers. The Illuminati spread across Germany, having some success in joining and taking over lodges as well as starting their own. However, due to internal divisions within the Illuminati and increasing pressure from the Catholic Church, the Illuminati, Freemasonry, and other secret societies were banned by an edict of Charles Theodore, Elector of Bavaria in 1784. The group was banned multiple times in the following years, as many believed that they had not disbanded and continued their secret mission to overthrow monarchy and religion. Theodore would later seize and publish documents relating to the Bavarian Illuminati. Weishaupt had his position at the university taken, and he was banished from Bavaria. This was effectively the end of the Illuminati. Of course, almost immediately after the banning of the group, theories emerged claiming the Illuminati continued to influence geopolitics, especially during the French Revolution. One of the earliest polemics against the Illuminati was an essay published in 1789 by Jean-Pierre Louis de Locher titled Essay on the Illuminati Sect. British physicist John Robison published Proofs of a Conspiracy soon after, claiming the Illuminati had infiltrated the French Revolution through the Jacobins and Freemason lodges. In fact, when describing the group which had been secretly influencing the direction of the revolution, Robison emphatically stated, quote, "The association of which I have been speaking is the Order of the Illuminati." Robison also wrote about Weishaupt's tumultuous relationship with the Jesuits. He says that by 1777, Weishaupt had been, quote, "scheming the establishment of an association or order which in time should govern the world." Weishaupt reportedly told ex-Jesuits who had recently found themselves banned they could regain their influence under a new name by, quote, "directing the education of youth." Unfortunately, Weishaupt was only successful in convincing 2 Jesuits to join his burgeoning secret society. After being rebuffed by the Jesuits, Weishaupt considered them to be his enemy. In 1780, Weishaupt partnered with Adolf Freiherr von Nigge for help advancing the Illuminati's message within Freemason lodges. Nigge was successful in growing the Illuminati's ranks, including by initiating Johann Bode, who would later become Weishaupt's second-in-command and was responsible for the German translation of Nicolas Bonneville's book, The Jesuits Driven Away from Masonry. However, by July 1784, Nigge quit the Illuminati, accusing Weishaupt of authoritarian leadership and of being a, quote, latent Jesuit. Could Nigge's departure have led him to share concerns of Jesuit infiltration with his initiate Johann Bode, who then inspired Nicolas Bonneville to write The Jesuits Driven Away from Masonry? It certainly appears so. Thus, the accusations between the Masons, the Jesuits, and the Illuminati have been raging for centuries and continue to this day. What about the idea that the Illuminati practiced, or still practices, rituals linked to ancient mystery religions? Can a lineage truly be traced from the Knights Templar and Solomon's Temple to today's secret societies? Many theories try to link Freemasons and the Illuminati to ancient secret societies, but the exact path is unclear. While the modern version of these groups clearly have an ideological and spiritual thread connecting them to the Knights Templar, Rosicrucians, and ancient mystery religions of Greece and Rome, proving a direct, unbroken lineage is far more difficult than some conspiracy researchers may want to believe. What can be proven is that the Bavarian Illuminati was likely not the first secret society aimed at world revolution, and not even the first to use the name Illuminati or the Illuminated. In 1527, Ignatius of Loyola, the founder of the Jesuits, was suspected by the Spanish Inquisition to be part of the sect of mystic Christians known as the Alumbrados, or the Illuminated. Loyola would be allowed to live after receiving a verbal lashing for his apparent sympathies with the Alumbrados. This version of the Illuminati was said to have made their way to Spain from Italy. They believed in the then heretical idea of a direct communion or knowledge with God through meditations and visions. In 1525, the Inquisitor General issued an edict of faith directed against all individuals who call themselves enlightened, abandoned, and perfect. Loyola became acquainted with suspected alumbrados, including by leading a group looking for spiritual guidance. During the meetings of this group, it was reported that some women had seizures, vomited, fainted, and claimed to have visions of the devil. This surely put Loyola on the Inquisition's radar. Although the Illuminati is often used as the default name for the true ruling class, the name and the concept has been degraded to a meme which shows up in music, movies, pop culture, science fiction, and conspiracy theories about the top of the pyramid of power. The concept has become a punching bag for those who want to give a name to the force which is manipulating our world. Could the leaders of the Masons, the Jesuits, and the Zionists be the real Illuminati? Are the Illuminati the leaders of the alleged Committee of 300? Is it possible that the top of the pyramid may at times refer to itself as the illuminated or the enlightened ones? This could be true, and yet there is little credible evidence directly connecting the historical Bavarian Illuminati to the ruling class of today. Perhaps to find the top of the pyramid, we must go even further back in history to study the houses of nobility and royalty. The Venetian Black Nobility. The Venetian Black Nobility, or simply the Black Nobility, was briefly discussed by John Coleman in his work on the Committee of 300. Coleman writes, quote, "America is run not by 60 families, but by 300 families, and England is run by 100 families. These families are intertwined through marriage, companies, banks, and not to mention ties to the Black Nobility, Freemasonry, the Order of St. John of Jerusalem, and so on." Coleman makes several other references to this ancient Black Nobility throughout his book. He also names the families he believes makes up this power structure. Before we name names, let's dive into the history of the concept of the Black Nobility. The term Black Nobility originated in September 1870 when the Kingdom of Italy's army marched into Rome to overthrow Pope Pius IX and take control of the Quirinal Palace. Pope Pius declared himself a prisoner in the Vatican, where he remained for the next 59 years. Aristocratic families who supported the Pope closed their palace doors in protest, garnering them the nickname the Black Nobility by those loyal to King Victor Emmanuel II. By 1929, the Lateran Pacts would be signed between the king, Benito Mussolini, and Pope Pius. The treaty had the effect of recognizing Vatican City as an independent sovereign state controlled by the Holy See and provided for dual citizenship for the Black Nobility in Italy and Vatican City. The Kingdom of Italy also agreed to recognize all noble titles granted by the Pope. However, recognition of the Black Nobility was short-lived. By 1968, Pope Paul VI issued a document abolishing the perks and advantages granted to the Black Nobility. This included stripping the noble families of their Vatican City license plates and discounted rates on food. According to the mainstream history, this was effectively the end of the power and influence of the Black Nobility. The concept of Venetian nobility dates back centuries. Powerful Italian noble families such as the Colonna, Massimo, Orsini, Ruspoli, Pallavicini, Theodoli, and Borghese gravitated towards Rome to maintain ties with the Vatican. Some even became popes. Other powerful noble families gathered in Venice and Genoa, Italy, building their wealth off trade route monopolies. The families grew in wealth as the port of Venice became a gateway for trade to Europe, the Adriatic Sea, and the Middle East and Asia. These families also provided military support for the Crusaders, which helped Venice become an economic and military power. Over time, these families gained complete control over Venice. Prior to 1172, Venice was governed through the appointment of the Republic's highest official position, the Doge, who administered Venice for over 1,000 years. After that date, the election of the Doge was now the responsibility of the Committee of 40, made up of these same noble families. The theory is that these powerful families maintained control of Italy throughout the following centuries. While this group is sometimes known as the Venetian Black Nobility, owing to their origins in Venice, Italy, their power and influence spread beyond the peninsula and throughout Europe, including in London, England, with the establishment of the financial district in the City of London. Many researchers now believe the Black Nobility families can be found in Italy, Germany, Switzerland, the UK, the Netherlands, and Greece. As you research this concept of the black nobility or the Venetian black nobility, you'll find numerous lists from different sources attempting to identify these elite families and trace their influence throughout history. In the Committee of 300, John Coleman named several families he claimed were or are still part of the black nobility. These include the Giustiniani family of Rome and Venice, Pierpaolo Luzzati Fiquis, black nobility of Venice, Umberto Ortolani, infamous for his involvement with the P2 Masonic Lodge, the Orsini family, the Doria family, the financiers of the Spanish Habsburgs, Elie de Rothschild of the French Rothschild family, the Alba family in Spain, Queen Elizabeth II of England of the black nobility Guelphs, and Sir Moses Montefiore, the man who established the first Jewish settlement in Palestine. Other lists claiming to be the current families of the black nobility commonly include the Italian houses of Medici and Corsini, the Swedish house of Bernadotte, the House of Bourbon, originating in France with monarchs currently in Spain and Luxembourg, the House of Grimaldi, the ruling family of Monaco, the House of Guelph in the UK, which connects to the House of Windsor, the current monarchs of the UK, via the House of Hanover, the House of Habsburg in Austria, the House of Oldenburg in Denmark, and formerly in Greece and Norway, and the House of Orange-Nassau in the Netherlands, among others. I want to make it clear, confirming that these noble families and their descendants are the true ruling class is difficult. Some claim that these families are the true top of the pyramid and the so-called Committee of 300, pointing to their historic land ownership across Europe as evidence. We know that Cecil Rhodes and the Round Table groups worked with the Rothschilds to spread their influence around the world and to reabsorb America into the British Empire. Is it possible that the members of the various Round Table groups worked with the black nobility to manipulate world events over the last 200 years? Absolutely. I believe that at least some of these families, as well as members of the Vatican and the Jesuits, worked with the Zionists and Jewish bankers and the Freemasons and other secret societies to maintain their iron grip on humanity's destiny. While the preceding investigations have focused on the various groups choosing to manipulate humanity, there are those who believe that what we are facing is not only a battle of psychopathic, corrupted humans versus a free humanity, but rather a spiritual battle for the very soul of our species. Occult researcher Mark Passio is a former member of the Church of Satan who claims to have learned the hidden goals of a worldwide movement of Satanists and what he calls dark occultists. Passio spent time as a member and gained insights into the ways in which these dark occultists operate.
Well, in my youth, I became disillusioned with organized religion. My family was the kind of family that sort of went along to get along and just believed whatever was the popular aspect of the culture of South Philadelphia Roman Catholic background. I became very disillusioned with organized religion, and I sought out the opposite of that in my anger and angst regarding organized religion. And I encountered the work of Anton LaVey, then the high priest of the Church of Satan. And I basically devoured all of the material regarding formal Satanism in the LaVeyan style. And after doing that, I became a rank and file member of the Church of Satan, joined that organization, and subsequently I started a band that espoused the satanic ideology. And I wrote for small music fanzines, as they were called in the 80s and 90s, on the topic of LaVeyan Satanism. LaVey himself became aware of some of my work. LaVey himself offered me a priesthood in the Church of Satan and offered me to head what is known as a grotto. That's their equivalent of covens in the Philadelphia area. I did accept the appointment of priesthood and became a regular priest in the Church of Satan, which is their ranking just above regular membership. And I declined the grotto leadership because I saw Satanism and dark occultism in general back then as something that was just purely individualistic. After that, my involvement became a little bit deeper because I was given some people and organizations that did have their own grottos in my tri-state area, and I attended some of the gatherings and rituals of those local grottos. that is when I became fully aware that Satanism and occultism, dark occultism in general, was not what I had previously believed it to be, which was just a way to psychologically get a leg up, so to speak, on your fellow man by holding knowledge that they lack and then exploiting that ignorance as a power differential.
This is the sign of the horns, a curse sign, 2 fingers extended. One of them's the pox sign, that's 3 fingers extended.
A pox on you?
A pox on you. During the Middle Ages, this was used.
But instead, this was something that was wide scale in our world, in our culture, and it was being used by these eclectic varieties of groups of people and networks to seize power, to infiltrate all of our institutional organizations. And when I realized that every institution, there were people in positions of high levels of power that were involved in Satanism and the dark occult, seeing this in person at some of these rituals that I attended, I realized there was much more to this than met the eye, and these people were working together to ultimately bring about the enslavement of human beings. Upon realizing that, that's when I ceased my involvement and started to blow the whistle on how this all worked.
It is this group whom Passio believes are at the top of the pyramid of power.
From my perspective, the pyramid of control culminates in the human domain with who I have referred to in my work as the dark occultists of the world. And I would segment that into 2 groups. The lower end of it are Satanists. The higher end of it I refer to as dark Luciferians. Those who truly have the knowledge of natural law in hand, reject it out of their own pure egotism and selfishness, want to become God, and they want to do that by getting other people to build their compartmentalized system of human slavery for them, do the dirty work, bloody their hands, which these dark Luciferians will not do themselves. They just issue the commands and pay people. That's who runs things from the perspective of the human domain. I have my own beliefs regarding it going into the spiritual slash non-terrestrial slash extra-dimensional domain. However, substantiating that is somewhat more difficult, so that's conjectural. I would say it does pass off into the spiritual extra-dimensional realm, and that ultimately even these people at the highest levels of the human domain of power are taking marching orders from others, and they are puppets.
The otherworldly influence. Conspiracy researcher David Icke has referred to the ruling class at the top of the pyramid as the global cult. Regarding who he thinks is running this cult, he is most well known for his statements in the late 1990s claiming that shape-shifting reptilians are at the top.
The reptilian entities possess their hybrid stooges, and the secret society network within this reality manipulates the stooges and their gophers and agents into the positions of power.
Icke has alternatively referred to these reptilians as archons and Anunnaki. In his 1999 book, The Biggest Secret, the book that will change the world, Icke writes, quote, "Putting together the massive evidence, views, research, and opinions that I have read or heard almost daily these past years, I feel the Anunnaki are a race from a reptile genetic stream." He points to statements in the Bible and other historical accounts of serpents and snakes as evidence of this reptilian race interacting with humanity. In 2024, I asked David Icke if he still stands by these statements and asked him to elaborate on his thesis.
When you have a perception, the perception dictates your behavior. So where does the perception come from? It comes from your state of consciousness. Your state of consciousness dictates your perception, which then dictates your behavior. And if you look at religions and one of the common themes, it is that there is a non-human, highly negative, psychopathic force. I've heard these common themes all over the world of a highly negative force, which I say is a state of inverted consciousness that is manipulating human society. So if we start at the top of this pyramid, it's that state of consciousness. It's inverted, it's chaotic, it's psychopathic. But it works through endless different levels of what you might call form. So it will work through form that will take a reptilian form and other non-human forms. And the levels I'm talking about up to this point are all outside of human sight. And to really grasp what is happening, we've really got to understand the illusory nature of the reality that we're experiencing. And for me, every child should be taught at the first earliest time they can grasp it, this simple fact that when you look through your eyes into any space, you're not seeing everything in that space. You're seeing a tiny band of frequency called visible light, which is all that we can see. And the entities, the consciousness that I'm talking about that's behind all this is in that realm outside of visible light. Though people say to me, well, why can't we see them then? Because you can virtually see nothing, mate. That's why. And then you have to have a means by which this consciousness and these entities operating outside the human frequency band can manipulate the human world. And this is where this global cult comes in. The consciousness is the top of the pyramid. And everything in any kind of form, whether it's a more etheric form like the entities outside of human sight, whether it's a dense physical form like those within human sight, they're all possessed, yes, dictated to in their perceptions and thus their behavior, thus their lack of empathy, their lack of compassion. They're all expressions of this consciousness.
Catherine Austin Fitts, the founder of the Solari Report and former Assistant Secretary of Housing and Urban Development under the first Bush administration, uses the term Mr. Global to describe who she believes is at the top of the pyramid.
Who is Mr. Global? Mr. Global is my nickname for the secret governance system. We live on a planet Earth, where the governance system is secret. Trying to understand how it works is like peeling an onion down through many, many layers. It helps to understand the financial system and how the financial system relates to the assets it manages or it finances.
She also believes there is the potential for the top of the pyramid to involve life from another planet.
So we have the group that meets annually in the United States in the Bohemian Grove. We have the Bilderbergers, which includes sort of all the Western world. We have the Council of Foreign Relations in New York. We have the Trilateral Commission. And of course, there's a multitude of secret societies. Many of my questions relate to whether or not we're dealing with the interaction between our civilization and one or more what I call breakaway civilizations of groups that have much higher technology than is commonly understood by most people on planet Earth. And is that breakaway civilization a group of humans? You know, who are they, where'd they come from? Or is it non-human? There's some people who believe it's non-human, but again, an unanswered question. I have a lot of questions. I think we're being impacted by interdimensional intelligence. Christians would call them angels and demons. Other religions have different names for them, but we're dealing with intelligence from other dimensions, and that is also in play, in my opinion.
On the other end of the spectrum, Adam Green believes theories about Satanists, Luciferians, and otherworldly evil only serve to reinforce the Judeo-Christian myths, which he says are the root of our problems.
Satan is a Judeo concept. And in Judaism, Satan is the adversary to God, but works for God. God created him. He allows him to operate and provides a divine role of tempting and testing, and is the evil inclination and prosecuting and accusing sinners. Everybody that blames everything on satanic cults and Satanism is ultimately just scaring people towards the God of Israel, the God of the Bible, and Jesus as the solution. So I see all this satanic panic just to be fear-mongering that scares people into the churches.
Personally, I fall somewhere in the middle. I don't buy into the Abrahamic religions, and I don't subscribe to the idea that what we are witnessing is the story of revelations from the Bible playing out in front of our eyes. However, I do believe what we are witnessing is a spiritual battle. For me, the battle happens every day in our individual hearts and minds. When an individual is consumed by their trauma, their fear, their insecurities and doubts, the predator class is winning. When we are incapable of overcoming our personal traumas and we look to external sources to help us, whether that be drugs, alcohol, sex, gambling, or government, we are outsourcing the important self-work that must be done for humanity to rise above our challenges. This is a spiritual battle for the soul of humanity, and it's up to each of us to do the necessary work so we may be an example to our fellow brothers and sisters in their own journeys to healing. By healing ourselves, we contribute to the collective healing of humanity, and through that, we can topple the pyramid of power.
You don't need a formal conspiracy when interests converge. These people went to the same universities and fraternities. They're on the same boards of directors. They're in the same country clubs. They have like interests. They don't need to call a meeting. They know what's good for them, and they're getting it. And there used to be 7 oil companies. There are now 3. It will soon be 2. The things that matter in this country have been reduced in choice. There are 2 political parties. There are a handful of insurance companies. There are about 6 or 7 information things. But if you want a bagel, there are 23 flavors because you have the illusion. You have the illusion of choice. Right. You don't get the real important choice. There's no freedom of choice. That's a great point.
While some of the researchers we have interviewed feel strongly that there is one single group or organization to point to, others believe that the truth is a bit more complex. Richard Grove is a forensic historian who has been researching the roundtable groups for 2 decades. He does not believe there is one ultimate bad guy sitting atop the hierarchy.
I think it's a pyramid without a capstone. I think that there's a group of groups, and those groups have individuals in there, and some of those individuals are very powerful, but they can't coexist individually. They're grouped together now in a security alliance, and they've weeded out the unnecessary parts, and they're merging all the other relational parts. Like, it's down to Amazon and Costco, I love you in the future, which is going to win, right? So they're whittling down our options while they've already reached the technical acumen that they seek to deliver, and they're scuttling Western society to build their New World Order, Elysium separation from the people type of New World Order, Brave New World 1984 situation.
Richard Spence is a historian and professor emeritus at the University of Idaho and author of Wall Street and the Russian Revolution. Spence has spent decades understanding the role of secret societies and conspiracy on historical geopolitical events. He is equally skeptical that we can easily point the finger at one culprit.
Who's at the top of the pyramid? Or maybe to put it more simply, who rules the world? Is it the international oligarchy? Is it the Illuminati? Is it the high bank? What sort of? I'm not sure that those names really matter. What kind of a name do you have to have? Why even have a name? Why not simply be consciously aware of the power that you have? So, I am not, for my own part, firmly convinced that any such ruling group exists. I'm not saying they don't. I am reasonably convinced that there are one or more, perhaps numerous groups who think that they ought to be in that role and may in fact be competing with each other. That's another kind of scary idea, that you don't have one group of entitled elitists trying to run things. You have competing factions among them. In fact, given the nature of human beings, that's probably more likely. Now, I know that that's probably a very unsatisfying way of looking at it, because I haven't told you exactly what to look for. But They're there in one form or another. How much power they actually have, whether they are truly the masters of the universe, or they're a group of entitled, deluded people who think that they should be, there's something going on.
G. Edward Griffin, author of The Creature from Jekyll Island and a researcher of the pyramid since the 1950s, believes it is not a person at the top of the pyramid, but rather an ideology.
It really boils down to two things. The world is and has for a long time been in the grips of a war between an ideology called collectivism, and the opposite is individualism. And all of these things that we're trying to choose between communism, fascism, Nazism, etc., they are variants, merely variants of this thing called collectivism. I don't care what gender or how much money the person makes. I don't care about any of that. Are they collectivists or are they individualists? So now we have to learn what that means. And so I think it's so important, by the way, that I've devoted the last several years of my life trying to clarify this issue. I think that people fall for the trickery of this argument of collectivism versus individualism, mainly because there are collectivists who are definitely trying to make sure that they do get confused. All the greatest crimes of the world are committed supposedly for your behalf. You have to do all the things that the government wants you to do. Why? Because it's for your best interest, the greater good or the greater number. And if you don't go along with it, you're a bad person because you don't care about other people. That's the argument they always use. And so the answer is why people fall for it is because it's constantly being presented to them and being revered as though it is a gospel truth. But once you see the light, once you understand it, then of course the trick doesn't work anymore. Once you know what the magician is doing and distract you while he takes the pea from one hand and puts it in the other one, once you see it, then you're finally out of the woods. As the saying goes, once the bell is rung, it can never be unrung.
In the end, we may be able to identify specific names and organizations who are playing a role, but in doing so, we risk overlooking a crucial aspect of the pyramid of power.
Do not arouse the wrath of the great and powerful Oz. I said come back tomorrow.
If you are really great and powerful, you keep your promises.
Do you presume to criticize the great Oz? You ungrateful creatures think yourselves lucky that I'm giving you audience tomorrow instead of 20 years from now. Oh, the great Oz has spoken. Oh, pay no attention to that man behind the curtain.
While our attention has been trained on the external forces which attempt to control the destiny of humanity, we ought not forget the importance of personal responsibility. Yes, the intelligence agencies have the power to indoctrinate and spy on our most personal secrets. And when they work with the corporate media apparatus and the controlled mainstream alternative media, they absolutely can shape our perception of reality. No one can deny the dangers posed by Big Pharma and the medical cartel, or the toxicity of big agriculture and their pesticides. We can't ignore the very real influence of the foundations and the harm caused by the pedo class. However, we can take action in our own lives which lead to more personal and collective sovereignty.
So who are the ultimate shadowy figures, the final boss in the hierarchy of evil? I don't exactly know, and I don't exactly care. Yeah, there absolutely are organizations and individuals who've been viewing and treating the rest of us like livestock for a very long time. But even the most powerful people in the world, even the nastiest people in the world, they're still only symptoms of the real problem. They're not the cause of it. And as long as we, the people, believe that government is legitimate and necessary, the worst people in the world will always be first in line to exploit that belief for their own benefit. Whether you're talking about banking establishments funding both sides of every war, or secret organizations of nasty psychos constantly playing their divide and conquer games, or down to the politicians who are just each playing the game to see how much they can enrich and empower themselves out of it, and the left and right both totally do that, all the way down to just some sadistic moron with a badge on his own little power trip. All of that entire game, all of that is the inevitable result of the belief in political authority, the idea that we actually need rulers, that's legitimate. So who's the ultimate cause of this? In one way, we are. We the people. When we think and act like obedient subjects, empowering and enriching the people who claim the right to rule us and going along with whatever they say, of course, nasty psychopaths are going to be there to jump into the role of slave master. But we're still their power supply. Without us enabling all of that and paying for it with taxes and with obedience, even the most despicable psychopaths in the world wouldn't have any power at all.
Are you a patriotic American?
Yes, sir.
Eager to do your part?
Yes, sir.
Then there's something important you can do.
Oh, boy, I'll do it.
Shall I tell you what it is?
Yes, what is it? Tell me.
Your income tax.
Income tax?
Yes, and it's your privilege. Not just your duty, but your privilege to help your government by paying your tax and paying it promptly. Your country is at war.
This bitter earth. Bitter earth.
Researcher James Corbett believes we are asking the wrong question.
The question, who is at the top of the pyramid, is the wrong question, because I don't think that this is about individuals. Of course, there are individuals in positions of power, and we could look at many ways of identifying them. David Rothkopf, who was the head of Kissinger and Associates for many years, and a very important member of the global cabal, wrote back in 2007 about the superclass, which he identified as 6,000 people who were able to act transnationally and be able to basically enact any agenda across national boundaries. They weren't necessarily people in government, they were people in corporations or finance or international positions, and he thought this was a great thing. Yes, there is a superclass that exists that does have that kind of power, but it is not the people that are really the top of the pyramid. What is at the top of the pyramid fundamentally is an ideology. It is the ideology of centralization of control in the hands of a few powerful people. And once we frame the question in the proper way, rather than who is at the top of the pyramid, what is at the top of the pyramid, I think we can arrive at a better answer for how to solve this problem. Because if the question is who is at the top of the pyramid, and we identify the individual names of the individual people who are in certain positions of power, then the obvious logic of the situation is, well, we get rid of those people. So we get rid of those people and everything will be better because the top of the pyramid has been removed. But in reality, as I think everyone understands, if you removed those particular individuals from their particular positions of power, there would be 1 million people trying to jump into those positions as quickly as possible to take that power for themselves, because they believe in centralized authority. They believe in the idea that a few people should be ruling over, managing, stewarding over the masses. So fundamentally, what we're against is that idea. And if we can delegitimize that idea in the minds of the people, then it does not matter who is sitting in those positions of power, because power will not exist, will not function in a society where people do not recognize the legitimacy of that power.
This series has been focused on understanding whether there exists an international cartel which covertly manipulates the world for their own benefit. Well, after spending 5 years producing 16 mini-documentaries and thousands of hours of research, I'm confident a network of intelligence agencies, secret societies, NGOs, think tanks, world leaders, Zionists and technocrats secretly conspire to achieve goals which conflict with the interests of most people. As we've shown throughout this series, the forces behind the Pyramid of Power are fundamentally anti-human, pushing a eugenicist agenda that likely spans centuries, if not millennia. The question then is, what can we actually do to counter this agenda?
So I think the good news message of the Pyramid of Power is so many people are discovering that there is a Pyramid of Power. And once people realize that government is illegitimate, immoral, illogical, and is being run as a criminal enterprise, they're open to alternatives. And the number one fastest growing political movement in the United States and in the world appears to be voluntarism, or the idea that all relations between human beings must be voluntary, that nobody has rights that other people don't, that nobody has an exemption from morality, especially the government, and that the world is really a self-organizing system, and that everything the government does would be done better, faster, and cheaper by the free market, by mutual aid societies, by armed protective service providers, by dispute resolution companies, by insurance companies, nonprofits, and genuine charities, and that we simply don't need government. And at the Art of Liberty Foundation, we call that the one-way revolution, because once most people realize that you don't really need government, and that the government has been running unethically manipulative techniques to get people's obedience and fealty and adoration, well, most people don't like to be tricked, they don't like to be chumped, and they're out. And that's a revolution that's only going in one direction.
I've said it in every episode of the Pyramid of Power. The people are the answer. This isn't abstract or utopian. Our actions or inaction will directly shape the world we leave for future generations. I don't believe our problems can be solved through politics or voting. The machine is simply too vast and controlled for a real evolution of humanity to come from the ballot box.
It's true. We are aliens. But what are you going to do about it? It's a two-party system. You have to vote for one of us.
He's right. This is a two-party system.
That doesn't mean it's hopeless. It means we must wake up, grow up, and stop playing the games placed before us by the predator class. Rather than focus on national politics, we should invest our energy into building local freedom communities in our neighborhoods, towns, and cities. Decentralized strategies like freedom cells offer a path forward. By organizing locally, we can focus our efforts on building local food systems in the form of community gardens, urban farms, and permaculture-based communities. We can unplug from big tech apps, operating systems, phones, and laptops. We can support each other as we opt out of the growing technocratic control grid. I call this approach exit and build. Instead of trying to reform broken, corrupt systems, we focus on creating the ones we want. It's like the idea of voting with your dollar, but applied to all areas of your life. If you oppose harmful food systems, for example, you opt out and support local farmers or buy from ethical producers that align with your values. In addition to avoiding big tech and mainstream food systems, you can also reject the financial control grid by using cash and alternative currencies. Refuse facial recognition at airports, stadiums, and on your devices. Take a stand against digital ID systems, which are rapidly advancing. These actions are vital for the preservation of liberty. Opting out is important, but it's only part of the solution. We must also build parallel systems that challenge the dominant culture. I encourage everyone to learn more about exit and build strategy, freedom cells, and the philosophy of agorism, which focuses on building these parallel systems. Visit thepyramidofpower.net and check out the Solutions tab for a refresher on the ideas shared in this series. It's also important to clarify that opting out and building parallel systems doesn't mean running from the New World Order. We should still resist tyranny whenever possible. During COVID-1984, massive protests showed people they weren't alone and sometimes helped overturn oppressive policies. Of course, in many places the protests did not stop the march of tyranny. Nevertheless, as we exit and build, we must also raise our voices against policies that hinder our vision of a free world. Resist the rise of the police state wherever and however you safely can.
The solution is the same no matter who is ultimately in control of that structure of power. The solution is to say no to evil, the lost word, the word of all power.
We must get comfortable saying no to tyrants and set an example for future generations. If we don't, we should not be surprised if authoritarianism rises and freedom dies. We are the last defense for a free humanity. If this series has helped you understand the world better, spread the word. Download it, buy our DVDs, and share it on USB drives. The information war is still raging, and you are the only hope to awaken new hearts and minds.
If there you are as one person looking at this huge authoritarian monstrosity that's been around for ages and it basically has unlimited money and resources and power, of course you're going to feel hopeless and powerless. But it isn't just you against that big, huge thing. The victims of authoritarianism always vastly outnumber the perpetrators. The game doesn't work any other way. And that's why the control freaks are constantly trying to pit us against each other. Men versus women, black versus white, rich versus poor, dividing people by religions or nationalities or anything they can think of. Anything they can find to keep us fearing and hating each other. As long as we're screaming and snarling at each other, the control freaks in power who are robbing all of us, they know they have nothing to fear. But when the day comes that all of us mere mortal peasants stop being tricked into fighting each other and stop bickering over which master we should bow to and start actually disobeying and resisting anyone who claims the right to rule us, that's when tyranny and corruption end. Not by an election, not by legislation, by people thinking and acting like people who own themselves. And that is when people will see and will all the way realize the power they've always had the whole time.
The ultimate solution to defeating the power structure of our world that has created human slavery on Earth is for each individual to elevate their own level of consciousness to the point where they fully understand objective morality and natural law and how it works and operates in our world. And then to teach that to other people in as wide and as free of a way as possible in whatever methods of media creation that they can do, and put that information out into the general public so that others can learn from it.
Finally, I want to take a moment to acknowledge the heaviness of the topics that we've covered. We've talked about false flags, overthrowing of governments, murder, child abuse, and psychological manipulation. While I believe it's important that we take time to understand the true nature of our world, if conducting this research makes you miserable or you feel hopeless after watching this series, then they've already won. Do not allow yourself to be sucked into a pit of nihilism and believing that all hope is lost. As long as we are alive, as long as we are breathing, there is still hope. Not hope in false political heroes and reformism, but a true hope in the potential for an awakening humanity to shift into action. Awareness alone isn't enough. Being informed means little if it only leads to inaction and despair.
And I think people are starting to recognize that there is an agenda towards centralization of power and centralization of control. And that is key, because once people start to at least be able to identify what is happening, then it's, I think, quite obvious. Well, if we want to go in the opposite direction of the way they, them, those are trying to take us, well, then we have to do the opposite of what they're doing. Rather than putting more and more power in fewer and fewer hands and centralized positions of control, we have to move towards decentralized systems. We have to bring things down more local. We have to create communities of support for ourselves so that we will be able to not just survive, but actually really thrive, whatever these people in presumed positions of power are doing. I think once it is framed in those terms, for people who are starting to at least be able to identify this agenda, I think the logic speaks for itself.
I believe we need to continue to educate and empower our brothers and sisters and exit from these slavery systems and expose the power where necessary. We need to move beyond simply being awake and towards being activated, towards actively working on the liberation of humanity. Whatever you do, don't give up. Remember, you are not alone. The 7 generations are counting on us, and our ancestors are walking with us. We can overcome and thrive in the face of this generational evil which is attempting to subvert the beauty and the potential of humanity. Thank you for watching. Until next time, remember, you are powerful, you are beautiful, and you are free. To learn more about these topics, visit thepyramidofpower.net to see our transcript and list of books and documentaries.